Okay, so this month is Suicide Awareness Month, as many of you know. And so I want to make a video about mindfulness and mental health. And in this video, I want to ask a few questions like, is mindfulness for everyone? Are there any contraindications? Should certain people avoid practicing mindfulness, or at least proceed with caution? And if so, what kinds of precautions can we take if we're suffering from mental illness, for example? How to approach the practice in a way that can work for us? And then, can mindfulness help with mental illness? And before I jump into that, I want to start just by sharing a little bit of my personal experiences with suicide. So before making this video, I was trying to count how many friends that I've lost from suicide. And I got to around 7 or 8, and I'm sure I'm missing at least a couple that I can't think of. So I've lost quite a few friends over the years, and so it's a topic that's important to me, something that has affected my life in a big way, and some of the most difficult things that I've faced have been the loss of friends who have decided to take their own life. So out of those 7 or 8, I want to just quickly share a story of 2 of those friends. So one was a kid that I grew up playing hockey with in Alaska. And we had played on the same team together. He was my goalie when I was in 8th grade, so I was about 13. And on this team in 8th grade, we traveled quite a bit. We went to Vancouver and to Quebec, Canada, and we also went to Washington, D.C. And on a couple of those trips, I was roommates with the goalie, with Brad, and so I got to know him pretty well. He's a super nice guy. His dad was really nice. My dad and his dad connected pretty well. And years later, when I was in high school, Brad played for a team in Anchorage, and my hometown about 45 minutes away. And we were playing in, I believe it was the state tournament, and we played, my high school played Brad's high school. And Brad was one of the best goalies in the state of Alaska. He had a bright future. He definitely could have gone on to play college or maybe even professional hockey. But for whatever reason, that day that we played Brad's team, he was on the bench. So the coach didn't play him. And instead they played the other goalie, which most people thought was not, the other goalie was not as good as Brad. And Brad took that, even though their team beat us, Brad took that he didn't take that very well. After the game, my team went out to eat at a restaurant, and I saw Brad at the restaurant. And over the years, many years had passed since we played together, but over the years I saw him maybe once or twice a year and kind of would always say hi, and we were friendly. And I saw him at the restaurant, and I asked him, I said hi to him and asked him how he was, and I could really see that he was upset that he didn't get to play. So this is a high school hockey game where they won, but he didn't get to play. And So we went home. It was a long drive home because the tournament was in a different town. We went home and maybe some time passed, maybe a few days, and then we heard that after that game, Brad went home and shot himself because he didn't get to play in that game. So I had seen him just right before that and had a chance to talk to him for the last time. And people were shocked, and it was terrible. And it was hard to understand why he would do that over a game. And then the second story that I want to share was more recent. It was about 5 or 6 years ago, living in Shanghai, China. And at this point, I was teaching English, and there was a coworker, another American guy named Joe, and I had actually kind of switched locations, switched schools, same company. So I was kind of the new teacher at this language school, and Joe had been there for a while, and we instantly kind of hit it off, and we would go have lunch together and kind of have meaningful conversations, and I considered him a friend. And we talked about living overseas and the challenges, and sometimes how it can be lonely and difficult with different cultures and things like this. But I never really got a sense that he was really struggling. And I think he didn't want to let people know how bad it was. And one day, normal day for me, I showed up an hour before class to do some prep work. Joe came in a little bit after me, sat down at the computer right next to me. We were doing our work and we were just kind of chatting a little bit. I had no clue what he was going through. He was he was a kind of shy, not shy, but he was pretty reserved, pretty quiet, and I didn't really pick up on anything unusual about him. He was kind of the way he always was. And later that night, supposedly Joe went home, and I believe he lived in a tall apartment building. I believe he went to the top, to the roof, and jumped off the roof and killed himself. So both of those stories stood out in my mind, mainly because I had a interaction with both of them very shortly before they took their own life, and those were the two that really were the hardest for me to deal with. So suicide is a terrible thing, and as we know, the amount of pain and suffering that it causes the people around you, or the people who know the person, is just, it's immeasurable. And yet there's more to it than that, because we need to try to understand what leads people to do such a thing to themselves, and how they actually get to that point, and try to understand, from their perspective, that that seemed like their only option, or that seemed like the best thing to do, or it must have. And if it hadn't, then, they wouldn't have done it. Or there's a moment, where the darkness, where the confusion, where the pain was so intense that they decided to kill themselves. So now to come back to the questions about mindfulness and mental health. And the first question is mindfulness for everyone? I'm a big advocate, and I would say yes, it is. And the second question is, like, are there any contraindications? Like, do certain people need to proceed with caution? And I would say yes again. So it's like, okay, mindfulness, I think, can help everyone, but it's not a quick fix. It's not a guaranteed. It probably is best not to think of it as a fix, but as a tool that can help us to develop more clarity and a deeper sense of intimacy and connection and understanding of our own being, which we can then extend to other people, and we can learn to get along with life a bit better. Kind of understand the way things are, and by understanding, that doesn't take away all of our problems, doesn't really change the way things are. So if things are difficult, mindfulness is not going to necessarily make those difficult things go away, but it might make us more equipped to manage the difficulty, to shed light on it, to find some clarity and some composure, and perhaps most importantly, to have a sense of compassion towards ourselves in relationship to the difficulties that we're facing. And so if let's say that someone, well, let me tell a story here. There was there was a young woman some years ago now who went to a 10-day Vipassana meditation retreat. I think it was in the US, but I can't remember exactly. I believe she was American, and I think she went to one of the courses, 10-day courses in the US. And she had a difficult experience, as many people do, and she shortly after that committed suicide. And this was a big deal, and it's not the only time that someone has killed themselves after a meditation retreat. And so it kind of got a lot of attention, and there was articles published about it. I read one of these articles, and the conversation is getting more and more common because of this type of experience, that people are really questioning, like, is meditation good? Is it dangerous? Is it for everyone? And how can we understand what's going on here with someone, going to a silent meditation retreat and going home and killing themselves? So these are good questions to ask, and certainly if we don't really understand, like, what meditation is all about, or what a meditation retreat like that is all about, and the different factors at play, then it can be easy to kind of come to some conclusion that meditation is dangerous. It might cause you to go crazy, or if you're having any kinds of mental issues, then it could make things worse. And I disagree with that conclusion, and yet, if we scale that back a bit, certainly it's worth being aware of some of the 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 dangers, I guess, of the practice, and kind of the the mechanics of like what why why does it push people over the edge. Okay, so if someone is very unstable in their life, diving into a silent 10 day, actually they're 12 days, 10 full days. This is like the Goenka Vipassana course that many people know about. 10 full days of silence with 10 hours a day of seated silent meditation. And, it's very strict. They don't even let you do your own yoga practice. They don't let you read or journal or anything like that. So these courses are all over the world. They're free by donation. Many, many people have done them. And one young woman committing suicide after one such course can draw a lot of attention and a lot of skepticism, and perhaps rightly so, because that experience points to perhaps a bigger issue that many of us who have done such a retreat, who didn't end up committed suicide, still maybe felt a little pushed in that direction, or pushed like that it was maybe too intense and we didn't have enough support and we weren't ready for it and all this kind of stuff. The first meditation retreat I did, which was here in Thailand in 2010, was one of these same courses. They're structured the same way all over the world. And I had been practicing meditation for a couple of years before that, but I wasn't really ready for like going from sitting at home for 30 minutes to 10 days of silence, 10 hours a day of sitting is an incredible leap. And although it was very challenging, and I did kind of feel like I was going crazy a couple times, I sort of made it through the end, and I remember leaving the course like the best. It was like the best day of my life. Like I had faced the challenge, I didn't give up. It got a little crazy, but I was able to keep going, and the feeling of leaving that was like one of the best feelings ever. And everyone in my group, everyone was like so bright. Everyone looked so beautiful. So it's a powerful experience, and anytime there's a powerful experience, there's a potential for it to go, both ways. And so there's a potency there that needs to be understood and respected. It's like when I was a kid, I got my first gun from my dad for Christmas or birthday or something when I was very young, and that was an important lesson, because it's like, oh, here's a tool or a weapon that can kill someone, and I'm going to teach, this is like my dad, I'm going to teach you how to use it safely. I'm going to teach you how to respect this powerful weapon, this powerful object, that we can use it for target practice in the backyard, put up a bullseye and kind of work on this concentration and coordination. or if you misuse it, you could end up accidentally killing yourself, or your brother or someone else. And it's like, okay, very young age, and it's like you have a kind of healthy sense of fear about this gun. Like, this is not to be taken lightly. This is something to handle with care, proceed with caution. Mindfulness, an intense silent mindfulness retreat like that is, you know it's like a loaded gun in some ways. It's like it's a profound experience that can rattle the cage, and that could be a good thing, but certainly it might not be appropriate for everyone. Now, let's scale that down and say, like, okay, well, that's kind of an extreme example, 10 silent days of sitting 10 hours a day. How about just picking up a mindfulness meditation practice, on your own at home, or going to a weekly meditation group? Completely different experience. That's not, sitting at home for 10 minutes in silence, focusing on your breath or connecting to your body or noticing your thoughts. That's not a loaded gun, it's not the chance for it to be like an extremely profound experience is very, very low. So the risk is much lower. And certainly that's a good place to start. Now, recently I just read another article, and the title of the article caught my eye. Can't think of the name of it now, but it was something like, mindfulness might not be good for everyone, or something like this. And I kind of instantly, it was like, well, yeah, let me see what they say about this, because I kind of disagree, just, my first impression. And so I read the article, and it was some kind of study that, maybe, I can't remember exactly, 10% of people in some study found that senses of, anxiety and stress and maybe depression actually increased through this mindfulness practice. And everyone else said that it decreased or remained the same. And so there's kind of a high probability that mindfulness can help with mental health issues. And there's a kind of small chance that, and for some individuals, that it might actually make things worse. Okay, so let's look at this closer, because actually at the end of the article, to their credit, it kind of it didn't really align with the headline, but at the end of the article, it admitted that, like, mindfulness is probably for everyone, but for certain people, the way to approach the practice is very, very important, and they recommended that you have the guidance of a teacher, or you go for like a weekly meditation group and you kind of get that support of the group. And the last thing they said was that for some people, doing a guided meditation, like even if it's at home by yourself, you turn on the Insight Timer app, or you go to dharmaseed.org or something, and there's a lot of guided meditations for free online that you can listen to. And then you've got, an experienced teacher who's kind of giving you instructions and guiding you through this process, and helping you understand, like, how to practice and what to do with this time. Because I agree that, just sitting down and closing your eyes and sitting in silence, the reality is that whatever's happening in our mind already will become magnified in that kind of silent seated meditation experience. So if we're facing, if we're struggling a lot, or if we're kind of dealing with some heavy darkness or depression or a lot of anxiety, then what, like, this kind of practice is basically like taking away all the distractions from life. Turn off the TV, turn off your phone, no music, nothing to listen to, nothing to engage us, nothing to entertain us. And so what ends up happening is we inevitably, well, most of the time we become more aware of what's happening within us, because we're kind of taking away the external input, sensory input, and now we've got a greater idea of like the internal sensory input, which is, feelings, sensations in the body, what kind of mood we're in, what kind of emotions we're feeling, and what's happening in the mind, like the thoughts, the content and the quality of the thoughts. So if the mind is scattered and anxious and uneasy and restless and, all over the place, when we take away all of the distractions, which can sometimes help, kind of help to cover that up or to avoid it for a while. And then when we sit down to meditate, we kind of have to face the reality of our own music. And that can be difficult to cope with, can be difficult to accept. It can be it can be kind of shocking, because if someone's new to the practice, they might not realize the extent of how crazy the mind tends to be. And as we practice more and more, kind of like we start to realize that it's actually quite normal for the mind to be all over the place. And with greater proficiency in mindfulness, what we're kind of working towards is withdrawing from that a little bit, allowing the craziness to be there, but kind of taking our seat in from a more neutral observer perspective that allows us to not be totally caught up in all of that web of craziness. So it's like we can be the observer who's aware of all of that, but when we stop identifying with that, then it's like it's just there and it's okay. It's not us. It's not who we are. And so sometimes with certain mental health issues, that sense of perspective and space and kind of ability to kind of separate all of that craziness from the sense of who we are tends not to be there. So what I mean is, a lot of times for mental health issues is there's no clear distinction, that like there's all this craziness in the mind and the person tends to be along for the ride of that craziness. And there's a lot of kind of identification happening where there's no sense that like, oh, I'm over here and all of this is just kind of arising and passing away and, functioning according to the causes and conditions, which is what we try to realize when we meditate. But if we don't have that kind of, if we haven't developed that skill, that tool, then we're kind of we tend to just think that everything that's arising in the mind and in the heart is who we are, is like my thoughts, my emotions, my problems, my craziness. So this practice of mindfulness helps us to kind of loosen the grip of thinking that everything that happens within us is really really kind of belongs to us, or it represents us in some way. So, can mindfulness help with mental health issues? Yeah, it definitely can. I'm, I can say that from my own experience and from a lot of interaction with other meditators and some research and talking to people and this kind of stuff. But again, it's not a quick fix. It's not easy. And as I said in my last video, when I talked about the struggle is real and good. So it's like things might kind of get worse before they get better. So there's a couple big things here. Is like one, we're bringing awareness to mental health because it's Suicide Awareness Month, and trying to understand what leads people to commit suicide. And there's a lot of different reasons, but how can we use mindfulness practice to understand the mechanics of that a little bit? Well, as I said, when there's no separation, the separation is between awareness and, let's say, the madness of the mind. Thoughts and feelings, emotions, moods. Let's just say thoughts for now. That, when a thought arises in the mind, if we're being mindful, we can see that thought and know that it's just a thought. And it came from somewhere or nowhere, we don't really know. And basically, it'll go away. It doesn't last very long. And we can kind of see like, oh, I'm over here and the thought is over there. And the thought is not me, it's not mine, it's not who I am. So this is a big teaching from the Buddha called anatta, which means not self. So it's like we can see that what we become aware of is not who we are. And of course there's a question, well, who are we? It's a topic for another video, but for now, let's say that the best way to think of it is to think of ourselves as that awareness itself, as consciousness. So awareness becomes aware of these thoughts and feelings and emotions, but it's clearly a different thing. They're not tangled up. And the ability, let me say it this way, the ability to kind of keep them separate can definitely help in a big way. And the inability to keep these two things separate, the real sense that all the thoughts and everything arising within me is really who I am, then we're kind of along for the ride. We tend to believe all those thoughts and ultimately those thoughts and feelings, and ultimately those thoughts and feelings can take us right to the edge. And certainly, the immensity, the pain, the confusion, the hopelessness that eventually leads one to commit suicide is a big part of that. Now, I'm not saying that, you know, I don't want to make any big claims here that like mental health issues are simply a matter of not understanding the way the mind works or not having strong enough awareness or mindfulness. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that certainly it can help, but it could be a while before there's, you know, significant results, and it might get worse before it gets better. Someone, everyone is probably better off pursuing some guidance from a teacher, having some resources, some friends, a community is really helpful. Having some education about this stuff, you know, not just diving into it, and definitely not just diving into like an intense meditation retreat. So proceeding with caution, informing ourselves about the potential risks here, and understanding it in a kind of mental health, from a mental health perspective, is like, let's pursue mindfulness in a way that's going to work for us, and kind of recognizing where we are, and if we're suffering from mental health issues, then, you know, I would say, yeah, let's find a way to approach mindfulness practice, because there's a lot of hope there, and it can definitely help. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm suggesting people to forego, you know, seeking professional help or counseling or therapy or medication. I'm not saying that. You might you might do both, you know, and it's complicated, so I can't give like a real answer, and I'm obviously not a mental health professional. So, you know, my ability to speak on this issue is mostly from my personal experience, and you know, having some understanding of how mindfulness practice can and usually does make things better, but takes a while, takes a lot of commitment, and it takes a real sense of kind of knowing how to practice. And that can really be supported, and probably should be supported by having mentors, teachers, reading about it, listening to guided meditations, moving slowly, step by step, and, you know, maybe working up to doing a meditation retreat. And also, I know that it can make things worse. I had an experience in Myanmar where it was a 60-day retreat. Last 2 days, fighter jets flying overhead. I don't know why. And on this 60... sometimes the universe gives you something to pay attention to. It's like, okay, just pause and enjoy the sound. So I didn't finish the 60-day retreat, partially because I got really sick. But I was thankful that I got sick. I made it 47 days, and from the first 30 days was pretty good. And then I started to have some serious meltdowns and breakdowns. So between day 30 and 47 was a crazy ride. And maybe I'll get into that in another video, because it is, you know, it's one of the most difficult things that I've ever experienced. probably the only time in my life where I was sort of having suicidal thoughts for a while, because it was I, it got so confusing. I didn't know who I was anymore, and I had conflicting voices in my head that were telling me different things, and I really couldn't figure out which one to listen to, and I didn't know what to do, how to move forward. It was really scary. There was some very dark times. So I know that it can get a bit wild, and it's gotten pretty crazy a few times here at the monastery over the last few months. There's definitely a toolkit for like recognizing these situations and kind of knowing how to navigate them, and maybe I'll talk about that in a future video, because that kind of stuff can come from experience, but it's also something that we can kind of try to learn about, find out about, so that if we face difficulties in our mindfulness practice, we can have some tools to work with it. So for most people, mindfulness is going to make things better. Might take a while, might need some support. Start small, guided meditations, community meditations, this kind of stuff. But it could also make things worse. There's a chance that it could be too much, could be too overwhelming, that it could be too confusing. And certainly if there's a lack of stability, or there's certain issues going on, you might want to talk to your doctor about taking up a mindfulness practice. And if that's the case, I definitely recommend proceeding with caution. Start slow, don't jump into a 10-day retreat. Don't try to sit at home for an hour in silence. It's not easy, and a lot of things can come up. And so, starting small, 5 or 10 minutes, put on a guided meditation of someone whose voice calms you, and you find that they sound trusting, and mindfulness is probably not a good substitute for seeking professional help. And I will say probably, because it can be. It definitely can be. But that's not good advice, right? I don't want to say like you turn to mindfulness rather than going to talk to a counselor or getting on medication. I'm not going to say that. And so, everyone has to decide for themselves. But think about integrating it into your practice. Talk to your doctor. Take care of yourself. Be careful. And, reach out to someone if you need help. And if you know people who are, if you can see some warning signs that some people seem lost or really depressed or suicidal, try to be there for them. And it's one of those things that after it's too late, you'll always ask yourself, what you could have done. Like, maybe, why didn't I notice that something was wrong with them? It's like, yeah, we don't always know, but sometimes we do know. And you never know what a friendly message or calling them and checking up on them and showing the sense that you care about them, and that they're not alone, and that you're there for them, and being open, being willing to listen and support people in whatever way we can. Probably not the time to encourage someone to practice mindfulness, you know. Um, but in general, mindfulness can increase our mental health. And it's worth considering it as a potent, powerful tool that needs to be approached carefully, with respect, and with a bit of caution. Okay, so may you all be happy and well, and continue your practice. Feel free to leave any comments, reach out to me. Be happy to offer some suggestions or support for your practice. And or, like, I can maybe find somewhere in your local area where you can find a weekly meditation group, or a meditation center, that kind of thing. So, let's stay connected here. Be a bit bold, be a bit open. Don't be afraid to reach out. And when we all kind of make more of an effort to connect, it makes us stronger. And when people get more and more disconnected from others, that's when it can, it can get scary. And so, let's be a bit proactive. Let's talk, and let's stay in touch with each other, support each other, encourage each other, be there for each other, being willing to listen and offer our attention and our compassion. Okay, thank you so much, and I will see you again soon.